Live from Chattanooga, Tennessee, it's Nooganomics with David Tulis.
The bleak scenario I was mentioning a moment ago that suggests possibly some of the underlying causes for the obesity crisis pointed out to us by the health department report this in the past few days has other elements which are you might say violent to the human physique, the human form. Not just are people obese, rotund, corpulent, they are bruised, and there's a lot to say about that other dynamic of social breakdown, the breakdown of individuals, the loss of identity that we have in industrial debt-based economy, state supervised economy. We have the prevalence, as Valerie Radu of the Family Justice Center is going to tell us. We have the prevalence, prevalence in the sense of it being common, the prevalence of domestic violence, and she says that 1 in 3 women will be victimized by sexual or other violence in their lifetimes. That seems to me a hugely exaggerated number, but she says there's reason why it's that high. And it's another point from Valerie Radu is that 51% of crimes against persons are in a domestic or family or quasi-family or maybe pseudo-family context. Again, suggesting that the home, the place where one's bed and breakfast table are, is in many cases the locus, the place where evil is done, where fist hits face and people are injured. Valerie, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the Family Justice Center is a new city organism. It's been around since July 1. You started in August, and 75 families were in some fashion served by you and your staff. What is it all about?
The Family Justice Center opened July 1, has been a 3-year project. We're in year 3 of implementation. And this is part of an initiative across the state of Tennessee to address the high rates of family and domestic violence that we have in our state. As you mentioned, 51% of all crimes against persons in the state, as reported by TBI in 2014, were family or related violence. So the governor has creating a network of family justice centers. There will be 7 total, and we are the 4th one that opened in July. Cookeville opened the same day as we did in the afternoon. And there's basically one FJC in every metro area of the state. And the goal is to use this kind of different approach to try to attack the problem of family violence, if you will.
Well, attack the problem. Okay, you're a government employee. Government employees are always attacking problems.
Yes.
How is that done?
I mean, there's lots of ways to look at that. In this case, the Family Justice Center is set up so we are an umbrella organization that works with nonprofit partners in the same building to provide a wide range of services to people that come in. For example, we provide mental health services through Helen Ross McNabb. We provide free legal services through Legal Aid of East Tennessee. And we really just provided what's called a one-stop shop. That's kind of the term that's used.
And why is the one-stop aspect important?
Most people, when they finally end up leaving a violent situation, have to go to 10 to 12 different places to get services. And a lot of those people end up going back for that reason because it's too many places to go, or they go
back to their violent situation.
Yes, or they just give up and don't seek services, period.
And so if you have this, is there a new building that
yes.
In which this work is taking place?
Yes.
Where is that and what does it look like?
Right. We are located in the Eastgate area at 5741 Cornelison Road. That is our temporary location. The permanent location is in the same area at 911 Eastgate Loop. And for your listeners who might be familiar with the Eastgate area, it's next to the old Mission Cemetery.
Now, the nonprofit partners, do they include churches?
Actually, we are doing some work right now with the former White Oak United Methodist Church, which has become No, I think it's Cokesbury. Excuse me if I'm a little bit incorrect on that, but it has basically changed the way that it's working with people, and it's really focusing on outreach. And they have felt impressed and called to address the issue of domestic violence. And we have been having a lot of conversations with them about how we can be helpful and be a part of that.
Well, is the gospel ministry part of this effort, or is it simply the people who are members of this church and maybe the church government are available to counsel women or to have them stay in their residences or on the church grounds?
Yes, that's what they're looking at, is how can they as a congregation and faith community be trained to recognize domestic violence, to reach out in their community over there in Red Bank and provide some very basic services.
Well, talk a bit about the means of support of this center. Is there any nonprofit or donated money that goes to pay the staff?
No. The Family Justice Center staff, which is comprised of 6 individuals, is part of the city of Chattanooga, and so our operating budget is through them. However, we have grant funding through the state to provide specialized outreach services. For the next 3 years, we're focusing on underserved groups, so we'll be doing some work around that. But the Violence Against Women Act has a lot of money through the federal government to communities to address issues around domestic violence, and it's pretty common both for some of our nonprofit partners, like Legal Aid of East Tennessee gets funding from them to provide free legal services, and the shelter in town gets money from them as well. So usually funding is a mix of things, both private and government.
Well, how much of your budget would you say is laundered, perhaps, but in the end, sourced from Uncle Sam?
All of it, our operating budget. 100%.
Okay. It is in the end federal money, though it's passed through the state.
Some of it is passed through. Yes.
Well, you mentioned underserved communities. What kind of people are in these underserved communities? Is my listener possibly a member of that community?
Yes.
Talk about
Absolutely.
these groups, please.
I think it's important to remember within the statistics that while 95% of women are victims of intimate partner violence, men can also be on the receiving end of a violent situation. And we have had several men who have experienced that, and we have reached out to through the Family Justice Center. And I think that that's a group that really, is learning more about what intimate personal violence means. We had a roundtable discussion 2 weeks ago, actually, and one of the experts on the panel was himself a survivor of family violence, and he is a professional man in the community, and was able to really talk about how he'd had some real challenges through the legal system when all this happened to him, and he sought custody of his children.
Well, my listener is a little baffled by the idea that a man can be subjected to personal, as you describe it, intimate personal violence. Mm-hmm. What is the nature of that violence? Is it how does it work? And talk a little bit about the extent of it.
Sure. It works the same way it works when the woman is on the end of it. It's a cycle of power and control. And unfortunately, a lot of times drugs and alcohol are involved. In particular, the gentleman who shared his story at that panel discussion, his wife, when she would drink, became exceedingly violent. And he and his children were very scared of her. So when she wasn't drinking, she was a reasonable person. But when she drank, she became a terrifying person. And that's actually through a series of incidents that involved the police and the legal system, he was finally able to get out.
So he was able to show that he was the victim of assault and battery. And he had means other than a civil case against his wife. He had
Correct.
A criminal charge
he did.
leveled against her.
Yes.
For this. And the outcome of that case, has it been resolved?
Yes,
what
he has
penalty?
He has full custody of his children. As far as I recall, she served some time. She has visitation, but he is the primary custodian of his children.
Do you work much with the district attorney's office at the Family Justice Center, Valerie Redu?
We do indeed. Would you like to know what we do?
I sure would.
We work with them because they prosecute all the domestic violence cases that come through us. So our role primarily is to provide advocacy and support for the victims. So we go to court with them. We also provide emotional support. We keep them informed of their next court dates and the outcome and things like that, and are really just there available as a support. We do not provide legal advice, but we're there for emotional support.
So is victim services, is that a term that covers most of the public contacts that the center has? Victim services. So they're all victims in some way.
Yes.
And mostly women. and well, insofar as there's a prosecution, that would be against the spouse or the boyfriend or the ex-boyfriend, right?
Can
or
also be a family member too, so it could be
like
siblings.
a brother.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hmm.
Correct.
And you're working with the district attorney to make sure that there's that human connection between the prosecutor who theoretically represents that victim, and his efforts to bring the malefactor to the bar,
correct,
to justice.
Hopefully. Yes.
Well, what happens in these cases, Valerie Radu? You're a long time social worker. You have a PhD in social work. You've been 17 years. You taught social work.
I did.
What happens from your expert view there in these? Give a report on what happens in these prosecutions. Are they often dismissed? How are these cases ended?
One of the challenges of prosecuting domestic violence is that victims are often uncooperative. So for lots of reasons, the perpetrator can intimidate the witness. The witness can change their mind because it's a cycle of power and control. Most research tells us that people go back 7 times before they leave. So it's a combination of all those things. If you have children, you may be willing to stay in a situation longer because of those children, because you want them to know their parent. So the DA would tell you that, there's so many cases where the victim just does not want to cooperate.
And without the victim's testimony, there's only circumstantial
Correct.
evidence and the case falls apart.
Yes.
Well, talk about, Valerie Radu, why a woman, let's say the victim, here's a woman, since most of them are female. What goes through her mind as she says, I can't leave yet? You mentioned the children. Okay, well, how describe that in movement? Tell us,
Certainly.
give us an example of how this works as you've seen it.
For example, we do a lot of outreach. We get police reports that are the felony arrest charges for domestic violence. So that involves use of a weapon or strangulation, choking. So we will call the person listed on the form. And a lot of times when we talk to them and they come in and talk to us, first of all, the power and control cycle emotionally really gets people into a place where they feel like they don't have a lot of choices or they can't make those choices. And then you may have somebody who does not work outside the home or who only works part-time, who has been taking care of the children for a long time, and they become very scared about financially what are they going to do. There's a lot of fear amongst families that they will lose custody of their children. That's probably what I hear the most from women, is that they'll lose custody of their children, even though, like I mentioned, in that case with the gentleman, he was very fearful of that too, which is why he put up with her being a drunk for so long.
Is the fear of loss of custody aimed at child kidnapping by the state or the parent, the other spouse?
I think it's both. It's both.
So people are afraid of the state itself.
They are afraid of what that process can end up as. Yes. And afraid of that other parent. A lot of times the person who is the perpetrator in that situation uses the children to control the emotions of the other person. And that's not hard to do if it's your children. Have
you dealt with, Valerie Radu, in the time you've been the head of the Family Justice Center, any cases of child kidnapping by state officials?
We have not. No, we do work with Child Protective Services, but indirectly because of the way the Tennessee statute is.
And how is that?
They are the ones primarily responsible for all child abuse investigations and foster placement.
How is a woman who's in an abusive situation to find encouragement?
I mean, I think, I always tell people when I talk about this is that you never know when your word of encouragement helps somebody feel like they do have options, or makes them feel like they know that you are a safe person that they can talk to. There's a lot of shame and I think social stigma around family violence. It's not something I think you and I talk about in polite company. I think it's still one of those things that we want to believe and be hopeful that families take care of each other like they should. And so I think when someone can receive just support verbally, it goes a long way in making them feel like they have options.
The criminal justice system has many, many faults. One, I'd say probably chief among them, is that it's punitive and it doesn't have any restorative functions. Now, you mentioned that there are families and individuals whom are connected with the Family Justice Center in some way or other who have take advantage of a state fund, a victim fund. but there's red tape to have access to the benefits there.
Yes.
Say something about that, and then I'm going to ask you about, if I can remember to ask you about the whole idea of restitution and restoration in the court system, and how that's hard to get.
The Victims Compensation Fund is a state run. Every state has it, and it's an option for people who are victims of a crime. However, like you said, the red tape is pretty significant, and the person often gets very frustrated and gives up. And even people in the provider community who work with victims, like legal aid, will tell you it's very complicated to get any kind of funds through that compensation fund. And I do think we need some kind of restorative justice, and that doesn't happen a lot. And we don't have in our state a mechanism for people to have access to that. So you can have someone who's lost everything and has no recourse. Well,
what would restorative justice look like in a domestic abuse of a woman by her husband, and there are, let's say, 3 or 4 children in the household?
Yes, I think.
What would that look like?
One of the things that we hear a lot and we see a lot, and so does legal aid, is that the father, in this case, father of the children, does not want to pay child support, and uses that again as a way to have control, to keep controlling that person even after the divorce happens or whatever that person decides to do. And so they end up having to go to child custody court, child support court, and it gets into this very messy situation. I wish there was a way where we could do more mediation, in a way where the two parties could come together and really talk about, this is what I think is fair, this is what I think is fair, and let's find a compromise instead of always going to court.
Don't we have in Chattanooga 1 or 2 mediation services that run by, I know there's one on North Shore, run by a woman attorney?
Yes, there are 2. I think there's 2. Mm-hmm.
How does that whole line of work connect with what you're doing?
They do. I'm not as familiar with that one. I'm familiar with one that's downtown. They do mediation a lot with families going through divorce and dealing with child custody and child support. It does cost, and there isn't always, I think, an option with it for people who maybe cannot pay that amount of money to have access to that option. But it would be great in our state if we could have that in our statute, where people had to go through that first, instead of taking up the court's time and the system's time trying to argue with each other.
So the people, Valerie Radu, with whom you deal, are almost all of them in bitter, angry situations. There doesn't really seem to be an easy out. There's not really a way of settling these differences or ending corrupt or violent habits. The people you're serving, the victims, they can't persuade the other person to love them again. They can't persuade the other person to be gracious and forgiving.
Yes. I like that word, forgiving. We don't have enough of that, or grace.
Well, what do you do? What do you do in your job to try to encourage that to take place? How does that?
We talk a lot about forgiveness, and life writes some of the chapters in our story that we didn't really want. And we can choose to go forward and be bitter and be angry, or we can choose to take care of our children, if that's the case. Take care of your aging parent, take care of yourself, and see this as an opportunity to live your life a little bit differently. We talk a lot about that with people.
What is the vice of character in a man that would make him abusive? Why? In some of the experiences you've had dealing with the victim, what is it that drives them? What colors their perceptions? Why are they striking out?
I mean, I think every situation is totally different. However, a lot of times they themselves witnessed family violence growing up, and they saw that as a way to deal with problems. All of us have issues with our temper from time to time, so I think it's a real mix of things. And relationships are hard. I think you and I would say that is. So when people don't have those tools to solve problems, or they don't know how to do it in a positive way, we end up in very nasty situations.
One of the things that I have to watch for as the father of 4, and I've always had to watch for, is raising my voice. When I raise my voice, I realize that I'm somehow crossing a line. So I've had to govern myself to say, okay, please don't do that, or why did you, rather than raising my voice across the hall to the boy sitting in the front room in the chair, rather than saying, why did you not do the dishes? I say, son, can you please remember to do the dishes? Oh. And it takes really, even on a very mild level where there's a slight perturbation of the spirit, it takes a lot of self-control to avoid raising your voice. Of course, raising the voice is just where anger starts from, and where abuse always has very loud conversations.
Yes, I would say. And I think that's a really great, point. And I talk to a lot of my male friends and colleagues that I work with, and they as men are troubled by the statistics that they see, and they feel that a lot of times men don't have someone that they can talk to, another man, and talk about what's going on and how hard it is and how challenging it can be.
Valerie Radu is the head of the Family Justice Center. It's a city organization that has how many on the staff? 6?
We have 6.
6 people on the staff.
We have a lot of volunteers. We have interns. We have lots of great people there.
Now, my listener has children. What might you offer in the way of interns? What does he need to know about having his son or daughter maybe doing an internship?
That'd be fantastic.
What's involved?
It involves reaching out to me and letting me know. My email is vradu@chattanooga.gov, and coming in and sitting down and telling me why you want to do an internship. But I would love to talk to anyone who's interested.
Well, Valerie, thanhanks for joining us here at Hot News Talk Radio.
Thank you so much, David, and continue to do your good work.
This is David Tulis. We are at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, and we're brought to you by Choo Choo Barbecue, and also the numbers guy here in Chattanooga, Eric Pelton, EJ Pelton Company, will untangle your dealings with the good people and get help now. Call 622-3156. That's 622-3156. Ask for Eric Pelton. CPA has been in this line of work for a long time. Very fine and gracious man. That's EJ Pelton Company, the company run by the numbers guy. This is David Tulis.